Hello, everybody. My name is Magdalena Núñez, and in this experiment, I will answer the question of how does the temperature of a ramp affect the time an object takes to go down? As the question describes, my project will consist of understanding and figuring out how the temperature affects time of the object on the inclined ramp, which depends on many things such as the acceleration, velocities, inclination of the ramp, and forces. And this will be done first by testing different temperatures on the same ramp with the same object. The forces applies. The forces applies in this experiment was the weight that is going down, the normal force that is going up, the friction force that is going the other way around of the ball. In this case, the ball is going to the right, and the friction force goes to the left, and the friction coefficient, that is the coefficient of friction between the surface and the object. So first, to start analyzing the experiment, we should define what an inclined plane is. A ramp is a flat supporting surface tilted at an angle, with one end higher than the other. The formulas I used was weight equals mass times gravity, final velocity equals initial velocity times acceleration times time, acceleration equals 9.81 times sine of the angle. My initial hypothesis was that the object will have a greater acceleration and velocity when the ramp has a hotter temperature. First, the first thing I did was that I take different factors with external materials, such as the time with a stopwatch, the temperature with an oven and a refrigerator, the angle and distance with a ruler. Then I performed 3 different experiments with the same temperature, first hot and then cold. After having the time, distance, and angle, I calculated the acceleration. And after all, with all the information gathered, I could come to the conclusion by using Excel, by creating tables and making operations. The variables that I studied was the independent, dependent, and control. The independent variables were first the ramp and object material that was of metal, then the initial velocity, which was 0, the angle of the ramp, which I measured with a special ruler, and the weight. Then the dependent variables, first the acceleration, then the final velocity, because it depended on the acceleration, and the time, which depends on all of the others, of final velocity and acceleration. And finally, of the control variables was the temperature, because I adjusted it to the temperature I wanted. The materials I used was metal inclined ramp, and a golf ball, refrigerator, and oven to control the temperature, a chronometer to take the time, a camera to record the videos and evidence, and the most important part, an Excel to be able to compare with graphs, numbers, and equations easily. To perform my experiments, which had two parts, first the cold and then the hot, I used specific variables which cannot change. The independent variables that I measured were the inclination and distance, which was with a ruler. Then the dependent variables that the time was measured with a chronometer, the final velocity and acceleration that was taken with the formulas mentioned before, and the control variables that I adjusted in the refrigerator and oven. The range between the temperature was of plus or minus 2 degrees Celsius, and in the time was of plus minus 0.1. And I filmed 3 different videos and take out the average, so the result was more specific. As we can see, the distance was 17.4, and the temperature was in the hotter table was 39, and in the colder was 16. And And the acceleration in both experiments was constant because it does not depend on the time, thanks to the difference of time. Comparing both graphs, we can notice that the difference of velocity is minimum. In the hot surface, the final velocity is 7.55, and in the cold surface is 7.52, meaning that the ball takes more to reach to the end. So, how does the temperature of a ramp affect the time that the object takes to go down? My answer to the question was that the ball is in the cold surface will take more to reach the surface. My hypothesis was correct. However, the difference was almost nothing. This was probably due to the short distance and the time of the problem. So, if we weren't this ramp, it would probably make a significant difference. I had a lot of problems in my experiments and I figured out solutions. So I will tell you my problems. First was the materials. At the beginning, I couldn't imagine how I could make a ramp and an inclined plane with the materials. And then I searched all over my house and I figured out that there were a lot of materials. Then the temperature, I didn't know how to measure it because I didn't have a thermometer. Then I decided to put the object in a place with a certain temperature. Also, a problem is that I never used Excel before. I didn't know how to use it. So by viewing tutorials on YouTube, I figured it out. However, on my next experiment, I would like to change a little things. For example, to improve my final result is to I should planificate before the materials that I used, so there is no one missing. For example, if I don't have a larger inclined ramp, I should go and get one. I don't know, in the supermarket or in a friend's house. Also, I would like to have a second opinion. It could be of my professor or my friends to have a bigger perspective and another point of view. And here are my recordings, my evidence. They leave it there so you can see it. And my APA, that the first one I only used one citation, and the other is the Excel. So if you want to see my numbers and graphs, you're welcome. And thanks for your attention. I know, sorry.